Have you ever experienced that moment of awakening when you realized you no longer needed to shrink yourself just to make others feel bigger? It's not rebellion, it's awakening. And in that moment, a quiet but unshakable shift begins, one that makes the manipulator tremble, not because you screamed, but because you stopped reacting. Today's video isn't just an analysis of narcissism. It's a declaration for those who have been controlled, silenced, or forced to sacrifice themselves just to keep the peace. If you've ever loved too deeply, tolerated too much, or lost yourself trying to please someone else, this video is for you. Subscribe to this channel if you see yourself in this story, and don't take your eyes off the screen, because what you're about to hear could be the turning point in your healing journey. One, to shift in silence. What truly happens when you stop shrinking yourself is a moment, not always easy to recognize, but when it arrives, it changes everything. It's not a punch to the chest, not a desperate scream. It's a quiet, profound, and irreversible rising. It's when you, the one who used to stay silent to avoid conflict, to bow your head to keep the peace, to endure so others could remain comfortable, finally stop shrinking. And you don't do it out of anger. You do it because you're tired. Tired of making yourself small so someone else can feel big. Now, this isn't just a change in behavior. It's an internal shift, a silent rebirth. And if the person you were once dealing with is a narcissist, that moment doesn't just confuse them, it terrifies them. Because you're no longer their supply. You're no longer reacting, no longer begging, no longer needing to be understood. And that shakes the very foundation of the world they once controlled. A narcissist doesn't need love. They need your energy. Whether it's admiration, anger, pain, or confusion. As long as you're reacting, they're winning. They don't care if you're happy or sad as long as you remain in their orbit. But when you rise with calm conviction and begin to choose intentional silence, something miraculous happens. You're no longer part of the game. Your silence is not avoidance. It's the loudest declaration you've ever made. It's not the end, but the beginning of reclaiming ownership over your own mind. And you don't need to scream to be heard. You only need to stop reacting. No more explaining how you feel. No more justifying your pain. No more twisting yourself into knots to make others feel comfortable. That silence becomes a mirror they cannot bear to face. It reflects the truth they've worked so hard to deny. It exposes the emptiness behind their carefully crafted manipulation. And when they lose control, what do? They'll try everything to provoke a reaction from you. They'll push your buttons, blame you, play the victim, or suddenly become suspiciously sweet. But you're no longer falling for it. You see the cycle for what it is. You know now that every emotion you once offered them was used as a tool to keep you in a state of control. And then something powerful happens. You no longer need them to understand you. You don't need their apologies. You don't need them to change or repent. Because what you truly need, in the end, is to live in alignment with your own worth. A life no longer defined by someone else's volatility. When you reach this state, you're no longer trying to win an argument. You simply stop playing the game. And in the world of a narcissist, that isn't just confusing, it's a crushing blow. Because all their power was built on your reactions. When you reclaim your calm, you unplug the very source of energy they once fed on. You don't need to be a sword-wielding warrior to take back your power. You only need to sit in the clarity of your truth and stop getting pulled into the emotional storms they create. When you no longer check your phone every time they go silent. When you no longer fear their next words will shake your world. When your inner voice becomes louder than their manipulation, that's when you know you're coming back to yourself. You're not cold. You just learned to reserve your love for those who are worthy of it. You're not heartless. You've simply stopped pouring your energy into people who never valued it. And you're not cruel. You're just someone who, after choosing others too many times, has finally chosen yourself. If you are standing at the threshold of this awakening, know this: you are not alone. And if you've already taken your first step, keep going. Your silence, your non-reaction is the highest language of self-respect. And soon you'll realize you don't need the world's applause to know you're on the right path. You, where truth doesn't need to be acknowledged, only lived. Intentional silence, the weapon they never saw coming. There is a kind of silence that is not surrender, but the beginning of freedom. It doesn't come from exhaustion, nor from a lack of words. It comes from a profound awakening, the realization that your reactions have always been the currency the narcissist craves. Your anger, your explanations, even your heartbreak were all rewards to them. But when you stop paying with your emotions, when you sit in deliberate silence, their game begins to collapse. Silence doesn't mean you've given up. On the contrary, it means you're reclaiming your power without having to fight for it. You no longer feel the need to explain why you're hurting. You stop defending every emotion, every boundary. You no longer respond to their subtle provocations, their vague insinuations, or the manipulative tests they throw at you to see if you're still under their control. Your silence, when it stems from awakening and self-respect, is an earthquake in the narcissist's inner world, because they thrive in chaos. They control through confusion. They flourish in the emotional turbulence they create. When you pull back, when you refuse to play their emotional games, they become disoriented, and eventually they grow afraid. Because what happens when you are no longer guided by reaction? They will do everything they can to break your silence. They will poke, prod, stir confusion, and label you cold or heartless. But behind those accusations lies a very real fear. They are losing the one thing that ever gave them a sense of power: control over your emotions. Silence is not avoidance. It is an unspoken declaration. I am no longer the stage for your performance. You've withdrawn your mind from the tragic comedy of manipulation, of circular arguments, of constantly needing to prove you're not the villain. And that is what the narcissist cannot bear. Because to them, attention is oxygen, the lifeline of the false self they built. When you stop reacting, you begin to starve their system of manipulation. You no longer give them the disappointed glance, the heavy sigh, or repeat the loops of, "Don't you understand me?" or "I'm doing this because I love you." All of those once fueled their fire of control. But now you are a still lake, and in that mirror-like water, they begin to see the truth they've always tried to escape. They no longer have power over you. You're no longer playing the role of their healer. You no longer hope that if you just love them enough, forgive them enough, they'll finally change. You've come to realize true change doesn't come from trying to fix others, but from changing how you allow others to treat you. And then in that silence, you begin to hear yourself again. You hear the voice that was once drowned out. "I'm tired. I deserve more than this. I'm not wrong for feeling hurt." It's the voice you've neglected for so long while you poured all your energy into someone else's emotions. But now, in the quiet space of silence, you begin to return to yourself. And narcissists will try to fill that space. They'll escalate their manipulation, accusations, twisted words, even fake remorse or sudden disappearance, just to see if you'll panic. But if you stay grounded in your inner calm, you'll realize no reaction is more powerful than not reacting at all, because you're now living in a new energy, the energy of inner freedom, no longer trapped in endless loops of, "Was it my fault? Am I too sensitive?" Or, "What can I do to make them happy?" You stop, not because you've given up, but because you've finally seen the game for what it is, a setup where you were never meant to win. And when you stop playing, you dismantle the entire power structure built on your emotional instability. They will notice the shift. They will feel the separation. They will sense the space between who you were and who you've become. And that distance unsettles them because they no longer know how to read you. They used to know exactly which wounds to press, when you would give in, how long to stay silent before you'd come running back. But now you're no longer following their old script. You don't need to shout, "I've changed." They'll feel it in your silence, in your choice to prioritize peace over reaction, in your decision to stop trying to rescue a relationship that only you were carrying. And when they sense that loss of control, what terrifies them isn't losing you, it's losing their influence over you. Silence, when rooted in inner strength, is the most convincing rejection of their power. You don't need to win an argument. You only need to make sure they no longer win control over your mind. And that is the real victory. 3, it's not that you change, you just return to who you truly are. When you begin to see clearly, the truth no longer hides. There's a moment that doesn't arrive with a bang or a dramatic event. It's just a quiet pause in the midst of familiar chaos, and suddenly you see it. Something you've always felt deep down but never dared to name. You look into their eyes, hear their sweet or blame-laden voice, and it hits you. I've been manipulated. I've been caught in a game I was never really allowed to play. And in that same moment, everything that once confused you begins to make sense. All those times you were made to apologize for your feelings, all those days you walked on eggshells just to avoid setting them off, every conversation where no matter how right you felt, you somehow ended up being the one who was wrong. All the scattered puzzle pieces suddenly align, and the picture becomes clear. This wasn't love. The truth was always there. You just hadn't been still enough to see it. As long as you were caught in reaction, explaining, defending, trying to heal both of you, you couldn't observe. But when you pull back, when you choose silence, when you stop being swept up in the emotional script they wrote, you begin to see what was once hidden beneath fear and sacrifice. You begin to recognize the pattern. Promises, then betrayal. Praise, then humiliation. Closeness, then abandonment. You see how they wielded emotion like a weapon, as if you were a puppet in their hands. They knew when you were soft, when you were most vulnerable, and they didn't protect those moments. They exploited them, and not out of love, but out of control. And now you start asking the questions you were once too afraid to ask. Why do I always feel guilty for just being myself? Why do I feel like I need permission to feel? To convince me that love must equal pain. And when you finally ask, the answers come, not from them, but from within you. In the quiet space you've created, the inner voice you once forgot begins to return. At first, it's faint. It whispers simple truths. I don't deserve to be treated this way. My feelings are valid. I have the right to feel safe in a relationship. And what surprises you most is that this voice, this gentle, strong voice, is you, the real you, the version that was once shoved into a corner and told she wasn't enough, wasn't worthy unless she complied. As you begin to sit with your true emotions rather than reacting how they expect, the fog of manipulation starts to lift. There was phrases like, "You're too sensitive," "I was just joking," or "You're imagining things." You used to believe them. Well, you recognize them for what they are, tactics of distortion, designed to blur your perception, to make you doubt your reality so that they can maintain control. That awareness, gentle as it may seem, shakes your entire inner world. It makes you cry. It makes you angry. It fills you with sorrow for having lived so long disconnected from your true values. But at the same time, it opens the door to freedom. And that is what the narcissist never saw coming. They weren't prepared for this version of you. The one who has begun to awaken, the one who no longer seeks validation, who no longer needs empty apologies, who no longer clings to the hope that love alone can change someone. They weren't prepared for someone who steps back to observe the pattern instead of reacting from raw emotion. And then you realize something even greater. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not wrong for feeling pain. You were trained to doubt yourself, because self-doubt is one of the most powerful tools of control. But the truth always there, waiting for you to return and name it. From this moment forward, you begin to reclaim your voice. Not through shouting, not through proving, but simply by existing with clarity and honesty. And then something miraculous happens. The truth inside you begins to illuminate everything. It makes their false accusations look absurd. It stops you from making excuses for their emotional neglect. It helps you see with unshakable clarity that you deserve a love that doesn't require you to shrink. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of healing. There will still be layers of pain to unravel, moments when you're tempted to return to the familiar. But the difference now is this: you've seen the light. And once that light has been revealed, it can never be extinguished. Or when you no longer need them to change to find peace. When you stop reacting, their world begins to collapse. There is a kind of transformation that needs no noise, no announcement. It shows in your eyes, in the way you walk, in the calm breath you carry. It's the moment you stop reacting the way you used to. No more rage, no more tears, no more trembling in fear of being abandoned. And to a narcissist, that shift isn't just surprising, it's terrifying, because the only real power they ever had was their ability to control your emotions. When you stop begging, stop explaining, stop trying to make them understand, you are stepping off the stage they always directed. And what scares them most is not that you hate them, it's that you no longer care. You don't need to shout, "I've changed." They feel it before you even say a word. They sense it when you no longer reply right away, when you no longer rush to fix the conflict. They feel it when you remain silent through their provocation. When you look at them without that old plea for kindness in your eyes. That calmness in the eyes of a narcissist is not a sign of peace. It's a warning signal. They realize you're no longer inside their matrix, no longer dancing like a puppet to their raised eyebrows, their calculated silences. And what confuses them most is this: they no longer know what to do with this version of you, because for so long they were used to you being the one who always tried to fix things, tried to make peace, tried to find a cause, tried to hold everything together. But now you're not trying anymore. You're simply present, clear, grounded, unbothered, and no longer clinging. And that is something the narcissist has no strategy for. They know how to fight anger. They know how to deflect blame, but they don't know how to fight someone who refuses to play by the old rules. They will try everything to pull you back into the game. They may become unusually charming, surprisingly kind, or swing the other way, angry, distant, or playing the victim. Who's been abandoned by you? But behind every tactic is the same fear, the fear of losing control. Because in the mind of a narcissist, you were never meant to be free. You are an extension of them, a mirror reflecting their sense of importance. And when that mirror no longer reflects what they want to see, they lose their sense of direction. And what unravels them the most is this: your peace no longer comes from their approval. You no longer need their praise. You no longer need their apologetic embrace. You no longer need to hear "I'll change." Your peace is now built from within, and that destroys the entire world they once controlled. You were once the one who asked, "You better be. Did I do something wrong? Should I have done it differently?" Now you no longer ask. You observe, you feel, and you choose not to be controlled. When you stop seeking answers from them, you begin to hear the voice within you again. And that voice, the one that had once been silenced, is what leads you back to your true self. The version of you that doesn't need chaos to feel love, that doesn't crave unpredictability to feel valued. The one who now understands peace never has to be purchased with pain. And what happens when you stand firm in that new energy? The narcissist either retreats or attacks. There is no gray area. They might suddenly disappear to see if you'll panic and chase after them. Or they may grow aggressive, cruel, accusing you of being cold, heartless, or changed. But you know now, those accusations are nothing more than a last desperate attempt to provoke emotion in you. And still, you remain grounded, not because you are numb, but because you've felt too much for too long for the wrong person. And now you choose to feel with yourself, fully, freely, completely. You're not resisting to prove a point. You're calm, to affirm your truth. That's when the balance of power shifts. Not because you control them, but because you're no longer controlled. And to a narcissist, that is the ultimate failure, because they cannot stand before someone who no longer needs them to feel whole. When you become steady, self-possessed, and clear, you become immune to manipulation. And no matter how many tactics they try, they cannot penetrate someone who has chosen to live in alignment with their inner truth. That is freedom, not simply the escape from them, but the return to yourself. 5, strength is not about forcing. It's about choosing to walk away in silence. When you're no longer who you were, they no longer know the way back. One day, the narcissist will realize that you're no longer the person you used to be. Not because your appearance has changed, not because your voice or communication style is different, but because your energy has shifted. The way you show up, the way you hold calmness in your gaze, the way you refuse to participate in a game you always used to lose. And the truth is, they feel that shift before you even realize you've transformed. They sense it in the smallest details. You no longer reply immediately. You no longer look for reasons to excuse their irrational behavior. You no longer flinch when they use silence as punishment. And it's your calm that unsettles them, because they know if they can no longer control your emotions, they no longer hold any power. At this point, they will switch tactics. No more overt rage. No more blatant manipulation. Instead, they employ subtler psychological tactics. Harmless sounding comments, seemingly caring questions with hidden meanings, or really a surprisingly gentle version of themselves. They may say they've changed, that they miss you, that they finally understand, but you no longer believe them the way you once did. Not because you're bitter, but because you've learned to listen to the truth through intuition, not longing. And intuition cannot be lulled by sweet words. It senses the gaps in their speech. It hears the calculation behind the apologies. It sees clearly. They're not hurting because they hurt you. They're hurting because they no longer control you. You once believed that in rare kind moments, you clung to them as glimmers of hope, but now you see them for what they truly were: bait designed to pull you back into the same destructive cycle. You no longer react to their silence with anxiety. You no longer feel euphoric over crumbs of attention. You begin to see clearly. This was never love. it was strategy. And is that lack of reaction that confuses them, unsettles them, and eventually enrages them. They may return to play the victim. You've changed. You don't love me like you used to. Or they may lash out. You become cold, selfish, unfeeling. But you know the truth. You're not cold. You've simply stopped pouring fire into a house that was never yours to save. You're not unfeeling. You simply stopped investing in a place where there was never any sincere return. You've learned that true peace doesn't come from being forgiven or accepted by others. It comes from accepting yourself. And because of that, you no longer let accusations stir guilt. You no longer feel the need to justify why you need space, why you need boundaries, where you deserve respect. They're testing you to see if you're still as vulnerable as before. They test you with sweetness, with aggression, with blame, or with charm. But now you are the observer. You no longer drown in emotions so deeply that you forget the truth. You've learned how to stand still in the middle of the storm and realize the storm is not you. And they sense it. They feel that you are looking at them with awakened eyes, that you're no longer trying to fix anyone, no longer hoping that a toxic person will somehow learn to love you the right way, because you now understand people can only love properly when they're willing to face themselves. A narcissist cannot. They cannot stand in the light of truth, and that light is you. You don't need to scream. You don't need to prove anything. You simply show up honestly, no longer twisting yourself to please, no longer reacting to the strings they try to pull. When they see they can no longer steer you like before, they panic. Because it's not just that you didn't come back, you've disappeared from their emotional landscape, not out of hatred, but because you chose to love yourself. And that is the real victory. Not a victory over them, but over your former self. The one who waited for the message, who dissected every word, who wondered, maybe I'm just not enough. You don't need their validation. You don't apologize for being hurt. You're no longer driven by the fear of losing them because you found yourself. And what they can't bear most is not your anger. It's your indifference, your silence filled with clarity, and your lack of expectation, your disengagement, your emotional freedom, because that indifference is proof that the door has been closed. Not out of revenge, but out of self-protection. You've chosen peace over chaos, growth over repeated pain, freedom over dependency. And once you've reached that state, no one can drag you back into the darkness you walked out of with the light in your hand. You are no longer the person they once controlled. And that is what scares the most. True freedom doesn't begin the moment you leave the narcissist. So it begins the moment they no longer get to decide who you are. When no voice but your own can make you doubt yourself. When no glance, no message, no cold shoulder or flirtation can pull you back into orbit. Like a satellite caught in their gravity, you've walked through the chaos, not with bitterness, but with the light of awareness. Not because you are stronger than them, but because you had the courage to face yourself, your pain, your wounds, and even the illusions that once made you stay. You don't need revenge. You don't need anyone to declare that you were right. Peace is the most powerful declaration. And now you live in it every single day. The world where you are no longer manipulated, where you no longer shrink to make someone else feel comfortable, where temporary affection no longer tricks you into believing it's love. They may return, they may test the waters, hoping there's still a way to regain control. But now, you're the one writing the script of your life. No longer a supporting role, no longer repeating the same old story. You don't need to lock your heart away. You only need to open it to those who truly know how to love. And the beautiful part is, you've learned to love yourself first. If this video resonates with your journey, if you were once someone who loved too deeply, endured too much, and are now learning to stand firm in peace, hit that subscribe button. We'll continue sharing content that helps you heal, reclaim your personal power, and never go back to that dark place again. You deserved a life where you never have to apologize for being yourself. And if you already stepped out of that shadow, keep walking. Don't look back.